She sat in the back of the oppressive wood-panelled room, a ghost in a borrowed black dress. The family in the front row, the widow, the son, the daughter, looked through her as if she were made of glass. They were the Blackwells, a dynasty of steel and ice, waiting to claim their empire. She was Serafina Hayes, the nurse who had held the old man's hand. No one noticed her. No one spoke to her. But in 10 minutes, her name would be the only one that mattered, unleashing a war that would expose a secret buried for 30 years. The offices of Covington, Steele, and Croft were designed to intimidate. They occupied the 40th floor of a glass and steel tower in downtown Chicago, but the inside was a fortress of old-world money. Mahogany walls, smelling faintly of lemon oil and old leather, were adorned with portraits of men long dead. The carpet was so thick it seemed to absorb all sound, all hope. Serafina Hayes sat on a spindly-legged chair near the door, her worn handbag clutched in her lap. She felt like a mouse that had wandered into a lion's den. In the front row, on a plush leather sofa, sat the Blackwells. Catherine Blackwell, the widow, was a sculpture of icy blonde perfection. Her black Chanel suit was impeccable, her grief manifested as a single, flawless pearl earring. She hadn't shed a tear at the funeral. She'd merely seemed inconvenienced. Beside her, Marcus Blackwell, the heir apparent, tapped his $20,000 Patek Philippe watch. He was a man bursting out of his custom-tailored suit, his face ruddy with impatience and expensive scotch. He'd been an acting CEO of Blackwell Industries for a year, and everyone knew he was waiting for the acting to be removed. Then there was Beatrice Blackwell Smythe, the daughter. She'd married into an even older name and radiated a brittle, aristocratic disdain. She was currently whispering to her mother, loud enough for Serafina to hear. "Mother, must we be here? It's so funereal. Can't Finch just email us the distribution?" "It's protocol, dear," Catherine murmured, her eyes fixed on the empty chair at the head of the massive conference table. "Your father was a traditionalist. That is, when he wasn't being a sentimental old fool." Serafina flinched. She was, she assumed, the sentimental fool's final project. She had been Arthur Montgomery Blackwell's private nurse and companion for the last 2 years of his life. The family had hired her, barely glanced at her resume, and then dismissed her from their minds. They had visited their patriarch at Blackwell Manor once a month for a mandatory, silent, 30-minute dinner. Serafina had been there every day. She was the one who listened to his stories about building his empire. She was the one who held a glass of water to his lips when the tremors in his hands grew too strong. She was the one who sat with him on the terrace at 3 a.m. when the pain kept him awake, listening as he pointed out the constellations, his voice thick with regret. A door opened, and Mr. Alistair Finch entered. He was a tall, thin man who looked as old as the mahogany. He carried a single, leather-bound document. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice dry as parchment. He sat, adjusted his spectacles, and looked at the family. His eyes flickered, just for a millisecond, to the back of the room. He was the only person who had acknowledged Serafina's presence, offering her a curt nod when she arrived. "I will now read the last will and testament of Arthur Montgomery Blackwell." Marcus leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eye. Beatrice stopped whispering. Catherine adjusted the collar of her suit. Serafina just tried to breathe. She was only here because Mr. Finch himself had called her, insisting it was Arthur's final, non-negotiable request. She expected a small bequest, perhaps enough to pay off her student loans, a final act of kindness. The family, she knew, expected the world. "First, the minor bequests," Finch began. He read off a list, $50,000 to the groundskeeper, $100,000 to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, $20,000 to his alma mater. With each minor bequest, Marcus's smile tightened. This was just cleaning up the crumbs before the main course. "Now," Finch said, turning a page, "we come to the primary estate." This was it. The air in the room crackled. "To my wife, Catherine Blackwell," Finch read, "I leave the sum of $1 million to be held in trust, from which she may draw an allowance, provided she remains unmarried." The silence was deafening. Catherine's perfectly powdered face went rigid. "$1 million?" Beatrice whispered, horrified. Marcus looked confused. That's the stipend for the guest house. Keep reading, Finch." "To my daughter, Beatrice Blackwell Smythe," Finch continued, his voice unwavering, "I leave my collection of 18th century art, valued at approximately $2 million, on the condition she never sells it." Beatrice let out a small, strangled sound. The art was hideous, and she'd been planning to sell it to fund a new wing on her Hamptons estate. "And to my son, Marcus Blackwell," Finch said, his eyes scanning the page, "I leave my collection of vintage wristwatches and my sincerest hope that he will, one day, learn the value of time." Marcus's face went from ruddy to a deep, dangerous purple. "The watches? That's it? What about the company? What about the house?" "I am getting to that," Finch said calmly. He took a sip of water, seemingly enjoying the unbearable tension. "All the rest, residue and remainder of my estate, both real and personal," he read, "including the 51% controlling stake in Blackwell Industries, the property known as Blackwell Manor and all its contents, the penthouse apartment in New York, the villa in Tuscany, and the entirety of my liquid assets and investment portfolios, valued at approximately $900 million. Marcus was practically vibrating, a grotesque smile spreading across his face. He thought it was a joke, a final test from his father. Finch looked up, over the heads of the family, his gaze landing directly on the invisible woman in the back row. "I bequeath, in their entirety, to Ms. Seraphina Hayes." If a bomb had detonated in the room, it would have been less violent than the silence that followed. Catherine Blackwell's hand, which had been resting on the arm of the sofa, clenched so hard her knuckles turned white. Beatrice's jaw unhinged, her perfectly applied lipstick suddenly looking garish. Marcus was the first to move. He stood up slowly, the heavy oak chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What did you say?" he hissed, his voice a low growl. Mr. Finch did not flinch. He repeated, "I bequeath, in their entirety, to Ms. Seraphina Hayes." "Who the hell?" Marcus spun around, his eyes sweeping the room. "Is Seraphina Hayes?" It was Beatrice who saw her first. Her gaze traveled to the back of the room, to the insignificant woman in the cheap dress. Her eyes widened, first in confusion, then in pure, unadulterated contempt. "It's her," Beatrice whispered, pointing a trembling, diamond-ringed finger. "It's the nurse." 3 pairs of eyes, blue and cold as glacial ice, snapped to Seraphina. It was the first time they had ever truly looked at her. In that moment, she was no longer glass. She was an obstacle. She was the enemy. Seraphina felt the blood drain from her face. She couldn't feel her hands. She wanted to be sick. 900 million. The company. The house. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. That can't be right. That's a mistake." "The only mistake," Marcus snarled, taking a step toward her, "is that you're still breathing." "Mr. Blackwell," Finch's voice cut through the room like a whip. "Sit down. Any threats will be noted." "This is a joke," Marcus roared, ignoring him and advancing on Seraphina, who shrank back against the wall. You You little gold-digging leech! What did you do? What did you do to him? Did you poison his mind? Did you sleep with him? Marcus! Catherine's voice was sharp. She was on her feet now, her composure cracking, revealing the raw fury beneath. Don't be grotesque. She turned her venom on Finch. Alistair, this is a farce. My husband was senile. He was medicated. He was not of sound mind. This creature obviously exerted undue influence. The will is invalid. We will contest this. We will have her arrested. I assure you, Mrs. Blackwell, Finch said, opening his briefcase, that will not be possible. Arthur was, as you say, a traditionalist. He anticipated your reaction. He pulled out 3 documents and slid them onto the table. These are 3 separate, independent psychiatric evaluations conducted by 3 of the top specialists in the country. The last one was conducted just 48 hours before he signed the will. All 3 declare him to be of perfectly sound mind and body, and acting of his own free will. He pulled out a 4th item, a small sealed envelope. He also recorded a video statement to be played in the event of a contest. Would you like me to play it? Or shall I save it for the courtroom? Catherine's face was a mask of hatred. She knew, in that instant, that she had been utterly and completely outmaneuvered by her dead husband. Beatrice, finally finding her voice, let out a wail. A home. He gave a home to a servant. She can't have it, Marcus yelled, his face slick with sweat. I run that company. It's mine. It's my birthright. It appears, Mr. Finch said, standing, that your birthright has been reassigned. Ms. Hayes is now your boss. In fact, she is the boss of all of you. He turned to Serafina, his expression softening, almost imperceptibly. Ms. Hayes, this meeting is concluded. The Blackwells may see themselves out. He gestured to the door. Marcus looked as if he was going to charge, but Catherine, with a cold, calculating look, put her hand on his arm. Not here, Marcus, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. This is not over. This is far from over. She turned to Serafina. Her eyes raked over her, from her scuffed shoes to her trembling hands. It was a look of such profound loathing that Serafina felt it like a physical blow. You may have his money, Catherine hissed, but you will never be one of us. You will live to regret this day. I will burn every penny I have to see you destroyed. Beatrice followed her mother, sobbing. I'm ruined. He's ruined me. Marcus was the last to leave. He stopped in the doorway, looming over Serafina. He didn't speak. He just pointed a finger at her, then drew it across his throat in a slow, deliberate motion. Then he was gone. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving Serafina alone in the vast, silent room with Alistair Finch. The adrenaline faded, and her legs gave out. She collapsed back into the spindly chair, her body shaking violently. Mr. Finch, she stammered, tears blurring her vision. I don't understand. Why? Why would he do this to me? This isn't a gift. It's a death sentence. On the contrary, Miss Hayes, Finch said, walking over to her. He pulled a small, heavy, ornate brass key from his pocket and placed it in her trembling hand. This is not a death sentence. He then handed her a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with the Blackwell family crest. Her name was written on the front in Arthur's familiar, shaky hand. This, Mr. Finch said, is your armor. Serafina didn't go to Blackwell Manor. The thought of that cold, sprawling monument to a loveless family made her skin crawl. She didn't go to the New York penthouse or the Tuscan villa. She took a taxi back to her tiny, one-bedroom apartment on the north side, the one with the rattling radiator and the view of a brick wall. The key felt like a block of ice in her pocket, and the letter felt like a bomb in her handbag. She locked her door, slid the chain across, and leaned against it, her heart hammering against her ribs. The transition from invisible nurse to billionaire target had taken less than 15 minutes. She sat on her second-hand sofa, the thick envelope heavy in her lap. For a long time, she just stared at her name. Serafina. He had always used her full name. "Serafina," he would say, "you have honest eyes, a rare commodity." With trembling fingers, she broke the wax seal. Inside were several pages of thick, watermarked stationery, covered in Arthur's spidery script. "My dearest Serafina, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the first battle has been fought. I am so very, very sorry for what I have just put you through. I know you. I know you did not ask for this. I know you are terrified. But I also know your strength, a strength my own bloodline has never possessed. I am not giving you a gift, Serafina. I am asking you to accept a burden. I am asking for one last act of service. Not for me, for your father." Serafina froze. My father? Her father. David Hayes had died when she was 10. He was a brilliant gentleman, an engineer who, her mother had always said, died of a broken heart. He'd lost his job, his savings, and his reputation in some corporate swindle she had never fully understood. His death had plunged her and her mother into a life of poverty, a life she was still climbing out of. She read on, her blood turning to ice. "You will not remember me, but I knew your father." David Hayes was my first partner. He was my best friend. He was the H in Billionaire Technologies, the company that would one day become Blackwell Industries. He was the genius. I was just the salesman. In 1995, we were on the verge of a breakthrough. David had designed a processing chip that would change computing. We were going to be kings. But my family, my wife, Catherine, and my son, Marcus, they saw only a payday. They saw your father as an obstacle. Marcus, even then, was a gambler. He was in deep to the wrong people. Catherine wanted a faster track to the socialite world. They conspired. They forged documents, created a false paper trail that implicated David in embezzling funds. They accused him of selling his own designs to a competitor. They forced me to choose, my family or my friend. I was a coward, Serafina. I chose my family. I let them push David out. I stood by while they ruined him, while they took his name off the company, while they stole his life's work. They bankrupted him. And it killed him. Serafina let out a choked sob, her hand flying to her mouth. The letter was shaking. All these years, she'd thought he was a failed businessman. He'd been destroyed. I have lived with that sin for 30 years. I watched my wife become a monster of ambition and my son become a creature of pure greed. I let them build an empire on the grave of a better man. I couldn't stop them, but I could create a contingency. 2 years ago, I found you. It was not an accident, Serafina. I sought you out. I needed to see if any of your father's decency had survived in you. And it had. You spent 2 years caring for the man whose family destroyed yours. You did it with kindness, with patience, with a quiet dignity that shamed me to my core. My family failed every test I ever gave them. You passed them all without ever knowing you were being tested. This is not a gift. It is restitution. It is the restoration of what is rightfully yours. Blackwell Industries was built on your father's genius. It belongs to you, but they will not let it go. They will try to destroy you, just as they destroyed him. Which brings me to the key. Serafina looked at the heavy brass key on her coffee table. It was ornate, old-fashioned. The key opens a room in Blackwell Manor. A room that only I and now you know exists. Go to the library. Find the third shelf, the section on Roman history. Find the copy of The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. It is a false book. Behind it is a keyhole. Use the key. Inside, you will find my real legacy. Not the money. Not the company. You will find the truth. I have spent the last decade compiling it. My family believes I was a doddering old fool. In truth, I was a historian. This is your arsenal, Serafina. Do not be afraid to use it. They will show you no mercy. Show them no quarter. Avenge your father. Be brave. I am so proud of you. Your friend, Arthur. Serafina sat in the silence of her apartment for a full hour. The shock was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The trembling stopped. The fear was still there, but now it was forged into something new. It wasn't fear. It was rage. She stood up, walked to her tiny kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. She looked at her reflection in the dark window. She saw her father's eyes looking back at her. They will show you no mercy. Show them no quarter. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the business card Mr. Finch had given her. "Mr. Finch," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It's Serafina Hayes. I need you to arrange access to Blackwell Manor. I'll be there in 1 hour." Blackwell Manor was a fortress of limestone and dark glass perched on the edge of Lake Michigan. It wasn't a home, it was a statement. It declared that its occupants were untouchable, above the concerns of mortal men. When Serafina arrived in a car service arranged by Finch, the massive iron gates were shut. A private security guard, a burly man named Peterson who had always sneered at her, stepped out of the guardhouse. "Can't let you in, Miss Hayes," he said, not bothering to hide his smirk. "Mrs. Blackwell's orders. You're trespassing." "Mr. Peterson," Alistair Finch said, stepping out of his own car, which had pulled up behind hers. "This is Ms. Serafina Hayes, the current and sole owner of this property. The documentation was sent to your security firm an hour ago. If you impede her access, you will be arrested for criminal trespassing and obstruction. Are we clear?" The guard's smirk vanished. He fumbled for his keycard and the gates groaned open. Serafina walked through the massive front doors. The staff, led by the housekeeper, Mrs. Davies, a woman loyal only to Catherine, were lined up in the grand foyer. They stared at her with open hostility. "Mr. Finch, I presume you're here to—" "Inventory," Mrs. Davies said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Mrs. Blackwell is in the drawing room, meeting with her real lawyers." "We are not here to inventory," Serafina said, her voice echoing in the marble hall. She surprised herself with its firmness. "We are here to inspect the library. Please ensure we are not disturbed." She walked past them, not waiting for a reply. She could feel their eyes burning into her back. The library was her favorite room in the house, the only one that had felt like Arthur. It was 2 stories tall, lined floor to ceiling with thousands of books. A spiral staircase led to a second-floor gallery. "Third shelf," she muttered to herself. "Roman history." She found the section. Livy, Tacitus, Suetonius. And there, a dark, red, leather-bound copy of The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. Her hand was shaking again as she pulled it. It wasn't a book. The spine and front cover were attached to a small, heavy box. Behind it, just as Arthur had written, was a brass keyhole. Finch stood guard at the door. Serafina inserted the heavy key. It turned smoothly, and with a heavy, oiled thunk, a section of the bookshelf clicked and swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow opening. It was a hidden door, perfectly flush with the shelves. "My God," Finch breathed. "I worked for him for 40 years. I never knew." "He said no one did," Serafina replied. She found a light switch and a set of narrow stairs illuminated, leading down. She descended into the darkness, Finch following close behind. The stairs opened into a room that was the complete opposite of the manor above. It was a bunker. The walls were concrete, the lighting was starkly modern, and the air was cool and climate-controlled. It was a private office. One wall was lined with file cabinets, each with a high-security lock. Another held a bank of computer servers, humming quietly. And in the center of the room, on a simple, modern steel desk, sat a single item. A thick, black, leather-bound ledger. Serafina walked toward it. It wasn't a journal. It was, as its title suggested, a record. Printed on the cover in simple gold leaf were 2 words, the David Hayes account. She opened it. The first page was a copy of the original B&H Technologies Partnership Agreement, signed by Arthur Blackwell and David Hayes. The next page was a copy of the forged documents Catherine and Marcus had used to frame her father. And the pages after that. Serafina gasped. It was a meticulous, detailed, and utterly damning record of every criminal and immoral act the Blackwell family had committed for the last 30 years. Arthur hadn't just been grieving, he'd been investigating. He had bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and audio transcripts. He had proof that Marcus had embezzled over $20 million from the company's pension fund to cover gambling debts in Macau, using a series of offshore shell corporations. He had evidence that Beatrice had blackmailed a U.S. senator to get her husband a favorable zoning variance, using photographs she'd paid a private investigator to take. He had a sworn, notarized affidavit from Catherine's former personal assistant, detailing how Catherine had systematically bribed board members and forged signatures to complete the ousting of David Hayes. It was a step-by-step confession of the conspiracy. Arthur had cross-referenced everything, every date, every dollar, every secret meeting. It was a nuclear bomb. This wasn't just grounds to win a civil case. This was enough to send the entire Blackwell family to federal prison for the rest of their lives. "Serafina," Finch said, his voice hushed as he read over her shoulder. This is one of the most terrifying things I have ever seen. He built a gallows and patiently waited 30 years to spring the trap. Serafina turned the page. The last entry was dated just 1 week before Arthur's death. It wasn't a document. It was a note written to her. "They will call you a whore. They will call you a thief. They will use the media to paint you as a villain. They will try to break you. This book is your shield. But it is also a sword. How you use it is up to you. Remember who you are. You are David Hayes' daughter. Make them remember his name." Serafina closed the ledger. The cold, hard anger from her apartment had now settled into a chilling resolve. "Mr. Finch," she said, tucking the heavy book under her arm. "They're meeting with their lawyers. I believe it's time we introduced ourselves." "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Arthur gave me a choice," Serafina said, walking toward the stairs. "I don't think Catherine, Marcus, or Beatrice deserve one." When Serafina and Finch entered the grand drawing room, the scene was one of panicked fury. Catherine, Marcus, and Beatrice were huddled with a team of lawyers. The man leading them was Corbin Thorne, a notorious corporate shark known for his scorched earth tactics. "File an immediate injunction," Thorne was saying. "Claim temporary insanity, undue influence, and gross mismanagement. We'll bog her down in litigation for 20 years. She'll be broke before she ever sees a dime." "Good afternoon," Serafina said, her voice carrying across the opulent room. The group spun around. Corbin Thorne's eyes narrowed, sizing her up. Catherine's face contorted in disgust. "Get out of my house," Catherine snarled. "It's not your house," Serafina replied calmly. She walked to the center of the room and placed the black ledger on a priceless 18th-century mahogany table with a heavy thud. "What is that?" Thorne asked, stepping forward, his professional curiosity piqued. "It's called the David Hayes account," Serafina said. The name hit them like a physical blow. Marcus visibly paled. Catherine, for the first time, looked utterly terrified. Her hand fluttered to the pearls at her throat. I don't know what you're talking about," Catherine stammered. "Don't you?" Serafina asked. "He was my father. He was Arthur's partner. He was the man you destroyed to build this mausoleum." She opened the book. "I'm sure your lawyers will be interested in this." Page 42. A detailed record of Marcus's wire transfers from the Blackwell Industries pension fund to a shell account in the Cayman Islands. I believe the total is 23.4 million. I'm sure the U.S. Attorney's Office will find that fascinating. Marcus looked like he was going to faint. "You're lying." "Am I?" "The routing numbers are all here," Serafina said, turning a page. "Or perhaps Beatrice would prefer we discuss page 78, the affidavit from the private investigator you hired to blackmail Senator Thompson. Adultery is one thing, but using it to manipulate a federal contract, that's a RICO-level offense." Beatrice let out a small, horrified squeak. Serafina saved her last look for Catherine. And then, there's the masterpiece, the entire first section. A 30-year conspiracy to commit corporate fraud, forgery, and wire fraud, all to steal my father's company. She looked at Corbin Thorne, who was staring at the book, his predatory smile completely gone. "This is not a will contest, Mr. Thorne," Serafina said, her voice ringing with an authority she never knew she possessed. "This is a criminal confession, and I am now the sole owner of Blackwell Industries, the company you defrauded." She turned back to the family. They were broken. The Ice Queen, the arrogant heir, the snobbish princess. They were just small, terrified, guilty people. "Here is what is going to happen," Serafina said, her voice dropping to a steely whisper. "You are going to call off your lawyers. You are going to drop your contest. You will pack one suitcase each. A car will be here in 1 hour to take you to a hotel. You will never set foot in this house or any other Blackwell property again. You will sign a full abdication from the board. In exchange," she paused, "I will consider not handing this book over to the district attorney." You can't," Catherine whispered. "I can," Serafina said. "I'm the boss now. You have 1 hour." She turned and walked out of the room, Finch at her side. The next few weeks were a blur. The media went insane. "Mystery nurse inherits Blackwell fortune," screamed the headlines. Paparazzi camped outside her apartment building, forcing her to move into a secure condo downtown, paid for by the estate. The Blackwells, however, went silent. Just as she had demanded, they dropped their contest. Corbin Thorne released a statement saying the family wished Ms. Hayes well and were confident in her ability to lead Blackwell Industries. They had vanished from public life. Serafina, guided by Finch and a new, hand-picked board, took control. The first few meetings were brutal. The executives, all loyal to Marcus, treated her with open contempt. "With all due respect, Ms. Hayes," one silver-haired vice president named Robert Sterling said, "what does a healthcare professional know about global logistics?" Serafina sat at the head of the long table, the seat Arthur used to occupy. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "I know that you've been signing off on Marcus Blackwell's fraudulent expense reports for 5 years. I know that you've been COO of a company whose pension fund has been systematically plundered. And I know that your signature is on the illegal wire transfer authorization from 2023. So, with all due respect, you have 2 options. You can answer my questions honestly and help me fix this mess, or I can call security. What's it going to be?" The contempt vanished. The executives fell in line. Serafina worked 20-hour days. She was not a natural CEO, but she was a fast learner, and she had one thing the Blackwells never did: a conscience. She dug into the company's files. She found where Marcus had cut corners, where he'd exploited workers, where he'd polluted. She also found herself incredibly, deeply lonely. She was the richest woman in Chicago, and she had no one. She was an island, surrounded by sharks. The power was immense, but it was cold. One night, exhausted, she was reviewing a quarterly report when Finch brought her a cup of tea. "You're doing well," he said gently. "You're a natural. You have your father's mind." "I don't," Serafina said, rubbing her temples. "I'm just angry. I'm running this whole thing on pure rage. What happens when it runs out?" "Then you run it on principle," Finch said. Arthur knew what he was doing. He didn't just give you the money. He gave you a purpose. He was right. But the victory felt hollow. The Blackwells were gone, living in quiet disgrace. But they were free. They were rich, even without the empire. Catherine had her trust, Beatrice her art, Marcus his watches. They had gotten away with it. Her promise to consider not pressing charges felt weak. It felt like her father's cowardice. That's when the phone call came. It was from an unknown number. "Ms. Hayes?" The voice was gravelly, frightened. It was Marcus. "What do you want, Marcus?" I need to see you. Please, it's my mother. She's not right. She's obsessed. She's planning something. I think you're in danger." Serafina agreed to meet him, against Finch's strenuous objections. She chose a public place, the crowded atrium of the Chicago Cultural Center, under the massive Tiffany dome. She brought her own security, 2 plain-clothed men who stayed 20 feet away. Marcus looked terrible. He had lost weight. His expensive suit hung on him, and his hands were shaking. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month. "Thank you for coming," he rasped, sitting across from her. "What is this, Marcus?" "It's my mother," he said, his eyes darting around. "She's lost it. You took everything. Her name, her house, her power. She's been meeting with very bad people. Not lawyers. People like the ones I used to owe money to. What are you talking about?" "She has a new will," he whispered, leaning in. She found a new will, one that supersedes yours. It leaves everything to her. It's dated 2 days after yours was signed." Serafina's blood ran cold. "It's a forgery." "Of course it is," Marcus hissed. "But it's a perfect forgery. She's found an expert, and she has a witness. A nurse from the hospital. She paid her off. She's going to claim Arthur signed it during a moment of lucidity just before he died, after you'd left. She's going to file it tomorrow." "It won't work," Serafina said, though her heart was pounding. "Finch has the video statement. He has the psych evaluations." "You don't understand," Marcus said, grabbing her arm. "Her new story isn't that you influenced him. Her new story is that you murdered him. She's going to claim you found out about the new will and you overdosed his medication. She's paid a coroner to back it up. She's going to have his body exhumed. She's not trying to win a civil case, Serafina. She's trying to put you in prison for murder." Serafina stared at him, horrified. This was a level of evil she hadn't anticipated. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Why betray her?" Marcus looked down at his trembling hands. "Because she's using my contacts, the forger, the coroner. These are dangerous men. When this is over, they're not just going to walk away. They'll own us. She's drowning us all." He looked up, his eyes desperate. "And she's going to use the pension fund money, the money I stole. She found my offshore accounts. She's draining them to pay these people. She's ruining me." Serafina almost laughed. It wasn't conscience, it was self-preservation. He was still the same pathetic creature. "What do you want, Marcus?" "A deal," he said, his voice regaining a fraction of its old confidence. "I'll testify. I'll tell the court the will is a forgery. I'll tell them everything she's planning. I'll be your star witness. In exchange for what? Immunity. From the pension fund theft. You have that ledger. You give me the pages about me. You sign a document saying you won't pursue charges. I save you. You save me." He was offering her a deal with the devil. If she refused, she faced a murder trial, a forged will, a bought-off coroner. It was plausible. A jury might believe it. Catherine Blackwell was the grieving widow. Serafina was the nurse who'd mysteriously inherited $1 billion. But if she accepted, she was letting him get away with stealing millions from his own employees. She would be just like Arthur, a coward choosing the easy way out. "I am David Hayes's daughter," she thought. "No, Marcus," she said, standing up. "What? Are you crazy? She'll destroy you." "No, she won't," Serafina said, her voice like ice. "You seem to have forgotten something. I have the ledger. I have the truth. You want to make a deal? Fine. But not here." She leaned down. "You will come to Alistair Finch's office tomorrow at 9 a.m. You will bring the forger's name, the coroner's name, and every piece of evidence you have on this new will. You will sign a full confession for your own crimes. And in exchange, I will ask the DA to note your cooperation when I hand them the entire file. Maybe they'll give you 10 years instead of 20. That's the only deal you're getting." Marcus stared at her, his face ashen. He had been so sure she'd be terrified. He had mistaken her quietness for weakness. It was the same mistake his entire family had made. "You'd risk a murder trial," he whispered. "You'd risk prison to protect your mother?" she countered. "I'll see you at 9 a.m. She turned and walked away, her security detail falling in step around her. She was terrified, but she was also, for the first time, in complete control. The next morning, Marcus didn't show up. 9 a.m. came and went. At 10:15 a.m., Alistair Finch entered his conference room, where Serafina had been waiting. "He's not coming," Serafina said, her stomach sinking. "No," Finch said, his face grim. "He's not. But Catherine is. She's filed the new will, and she's filed a petition for an emergency hearing and an order to exhume Arthur's body. The hearing is this afternoon. She's accusing you of first-degree murder." The emergency hearing was not held in a grand, wood-panelled courtroom, but in a functional, windowless chamber reserved for probate and emergency motions. It was, if possible, even more claustrophobic. The air was thick with the scent of floor wax and controlled panic, but the media had found it. The room was a circus. Flashbulbs went off in a blinding, constant staccato, capturing every flicker of an eyelid, every bead of sweat. Serafina sat at the defense table, her hands folded in her lap. She had chosen a simple, modest navy suit, a conscious echo of the nurse she had been. She looked like a sparrow set upon by vultures. Across the aisle, Catherine Blackwell was giving the performance of her life. Dressed in bespoke Parisian morning black, a delicate lace veil covering her face, she was the very image of the wronged, grieving widow. She clutched a silk handkerchief to her lips, her shoulders trembling delicately. Beside her, Corbin Thorne, her shark of a lawyer, radiated a smug, predatory confidence. He was here to gut a fish, and he knew it. "Your Honor," Thorne began, his voice a smooth, confident baritone that filled the small room. "We are here today not just to correct a grievous financial wrong, but to stop a criminal." He turned, his eyes sweeping over Serafina with theatrical disdain. "We are here to expose a predator, a woman who, in a grotesque abuse of trust, preyed on a sick, vulnerable and elderly man. She was his nurse, his caregiver. She was, in essence, an angel of mercy." He paused, letting the words hang, or so he thought. But it seems this angel was more interested in his bank account than his well-being. She plied him with drugs, isolated him from his loving family, and, in a moment of his deepest confusion, had him sign a will that is nothing short of a fantasy. He gestured to Serafina. "The defense will show you a video of a sick, rambling man. We, however, will show you something far more concrete." With a flourish, he produced the forged will. "This, Your Honor, is the true last will and testament of Arthur Blackwell, signed just 2 days before his passing, in a moment of profound lucidity. A moment where he realized his mistake and sought to restore his legacy to his family, where it belongs." He then produced the paid-off nurse's affidavit. "We have a sworn statement from another caregiver, a Ms. Lydia Kent, who witnessed Ms. Hayes berating Mr. Blackwell, pressuring him, threatening him." Finally, he held up the bought-off coroner's preliminary report. "And most chillingly, Your Honor, we have this. A preliminary toxicology report requested by my client that shows pharmacological inconsistencies in Mr. Blackwell's system at the time of his death. Levels of medication that are not just high, Your Honor. They are lethal." The room erupted in a collective, horrified gasp. The flashbulbs were a solid wall of light. "Killer!" someone shouted from the gallery. "She didn't just influence him," Thorne roared. "When she learned he had written her out of this new, valid will, she silenced him. We are petitioning for an immediate injunction, a full exhumation of the body, and a criminal referral to the district attorney for the arrest of Serafina Hayes on suspicion of first-degree murder." The judge, a stern woman named Helen Price, looked at the report, then at Serafina. Her expression was grim. This was a coherent, damning narrative. The grieving widow, the new will, the medical evidence. "Mr. Finch," the judge said, her voice heavy. "Your response. And it had better be good." Alistair Finch stood. He was the only calm person in the room. He buttoned his suit jacket, adjusted his spectacles, and walked to the podium. "Mr. Thorne, Your Honor, has just told a remarkable story. It's compelling, it's dramatic, and it has absolutely no basis in reality. It is not just a fabrication, it is an active, criminal conspiracy. He has presented a forged will, a perjured affidavit, and a fraudulent medical report, and we can prove it." Thorne laughed. "Proof? You have nothing. A shaky video of a senile man." "Oh, we have more than that," Finch said, his voice quiet but carrying. "Mr. Thorne has built his entire case on a foundation of lies, and we have a witness who will testify to the construction of those lies. The defense calls Mr. Marcus Blackwell." The name landed like a stone. Catherine, behind her veil, froze. Her trembling stopped. She looked at Finch, her eyes narrowing in confusion. "Marcus," she whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. He's not here." Corbin Thorne looked baffled. "Your Honor, Mr. Blackwell is not on our witness list. We don't know his whereabouts." "Oh, I do, Mr. Thorne," Finch said, turning to the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom. "He is at this very moment in the custody of the U.S. Marshals." The doors swung open. Two marshals entered, and between them, his hands cuffed in front of him, was Marcus Blackwell. He was no longer the arrogant heir. His face was grey, his expensive suit was rumpled, and he looked utterly defeated. The courtroom exploded. This time, the judge had to slam her gavel for a full 30 seconds to regain order. Catherine was on her feet, her veil forgotten, her face a mask of pure shock and fury. "Marcus, what is the meaning of this? What have you done?" "Mrs. Blackwell, sit down," Judge Price ordered. Marcus was brought to the stand. He was sworn in, his hand shaking so badly he could barely raise it. He did not look at his mother. "Mr. Blackwell," Finch began, his voice surgical, "you turned yourself in to the U.S. Attorney's office this morning, did you not?" "Yes." Marcus's voice was a reedy whisper. "In doing so, you provided a full confession regarding several financial crimes, including the embezzlement of over $23 million from the Blackwell Industries Pension Fund." Thorne was on his feet. "Objection. Relevance." "It is profoundly relevant, Your Honor, as it establishes the desperation of this family," Finch countered. "Overruled," the judge snapped. "Continue." "And you also," Finch continued, "provided testimony regarding the matter before us today? Mr. Blackwell, I show you what Mr. Thorne has presented as your father's final will. Have you seen this document before?" Marcus looked at it, then at his mother. Her eyes were burning into him, a look of such concentrated hatred that he flinched. "Yes," he said. "And where did you see it?" "In my mother's study, 2 weeks ago." "Was your father, Arthur Blackwell, present?" "No." "Then who was?" Marcus took a shaky breath. "My mother and a man named Louis Petrov. He's a specialist, a forger." The room was utterly silent. Catherine gripped the table, her knuckles white. "My mother," Marcus continued, his voice cracking, "paid him $200,000 to create that document. She paid Dr. Miles, the coroner, to create the toxicology report. She paid the nurse, Lydia Kent. She was using my offshore accounts to do it, draining them. She was going to frame Ms. Hayes for murder. She said it was the only way to cleanse the family name and get the money back." Catherine let out a sound. It was not a scream. It was a low, animalistic growl. "You spineless, ungrateful, sniveling rat!" she shrieked, lunging forward before a bailiff caught her arm. "I did this for us. I built this family. You were always weak, just like your father." "Mrs. Blackwell, you are in contempt," the judge roared. Corbin Thorne looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. His case, his reputation, had just evaporated. Your Honor, this is clearly a compromised witness, a desperate man trying to save his own skin. He'd say anything." "He's right, Mr. Thorne," Finch said calmly, turning from the chaos. "Mr. Blackwell is a desperate man, and he is trying to save his own skin. That's why we believe him. But his testimony is not our evidence. It is merely the introduction." Finch walked back to the defense table, where Serafina sat, watching, her face pale but her eyes steady. He lifted the heavy, black leather ledger. "Your Honor, you want to know why Arthur Blackwell left his fortune to Ms. Hayes? You want to know why Catherine Blackwell would go to such lengths? Forgery, bribery, conspiracy to commit murder? The motive isn't in any of these fraudulent documents. It's in this." He placed the book on the judge's bench. The thud was the only sound in the room. "It's called the David Hayes account, and it is Arthur Blackwell's personal, 30-year meticulous record of the crimes, frauds, and immoral acts of his own family." Catherine, who had been struggling against the bailiff, went utterly still. The blood drained from her face. This was the blow she had not anticipated. The book. "It details," Finch announced to the stunned courtroom, "the original sin. A 30-year-old conspiracy led by Catherine Blackwell to defraud, bankrupt, and ultimately destroy Arthur's first partner, a man named David Hayes." Finch turned and pointed directly at Serafina, "a man who was her father. The will was not theft, Your Honor. It was restitution. This book contains the proof of the pension fund theft. It contains the details of the senatorial blackmail. And it contains, in Arthur's own hand, a full account of the corporate fraud that built the Blackwell empire." He looked back at the judge. "This hearing is a mockery. It's the final, desperate act of a criminal dynasty. We move for immediate dismissal, and we ask that the court recognize the U.S. Attorney and 2 federal agents who have been patiently waiting in the gallery. I believe they have an arrest warrant for Mrs. Catherine Blackwell, and quite possibly," he added, with a cold look at Thorne, "for her counsel on charges of conspiracy, forgery, and suborning perjury." As the agents moved in, Catherine didn't fight. She didn't weep. The Ice Queen had shattered, leaving only a hollow, defeated woman. She was cuffed, and as they led her past Serafina, she stopped. Their eyes met for the first time as equals. "It was all for nothing," Catherine whispered, not in remorse, but in bitter, profound regret. Then she was gone. The epilogue was swift. The reckoning was total. The Blackwell Empire, built on a grave, had collapsed into one. Catherine was convicted and died in prison 2 years later. Marcus, for his testimony, served 7 years for embezzlement and was released a penniless, broken man. Corbin Thorne was disbarred. The headlines changed overnight. The Ghost's Revenge. The Stolen Empire. The invisible nurse who avenged her father. Serafina Hayes was, for a time, the most famous woman in the world. She moved into the New York penthouse, but she rattled around in it. The silence was heavier than it had been in her tiny apartment. The victory was cold. She had won. She had avenged her father. But she was now the sole proprietor of a monument to his destruction. So, she made a different choice. She was not a Blackwell. She was a Hayes. She did not keep the empire. She dismantled it. She sold Blackwell Industries to a more ethical competitor, with one condition. The plundered pension fund was to be made whole, with interest, and every employee was to be protected. She sold Blackwell Manor, and it was turned into a public art museum. She sold the penthouse, the villa, the watches, and the art. 1 year after that day in court, Serafina Hayes sat on a park bench, eating a sandwich. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. She was no longer a billionaire. She had taken the entire $900 million, the money that should have been her father's, and created the David Hayes Foundation, the nation's largest legal defense fund for victims of corporate fraud and white-collar crime. Alistair Finch, now happily retired, walked up and sat beside her, handing her a simple cup of coffee. He was the pro bono chairman of the foundation's board. "You know," he said, "you just approved a grant that will probably save 1,000 families from the next Marcus Blackwell." Serafina smiled, watching the children play on the grass. The rage was gone. The fear was gone. The terrible, crushing weight of Arthur's burden was finally lifted. "You look like him today," Alistair said, quietly. "David. You have his eyes." "Good," Serafina said, taking a sip of coffee. "I'm not rich anymore, Alistair. I'm not a ghost, and I'm not a queen." "What are you then?" She smiled, turning her face to the sun. "I'm free. The world is full of invisible people, those pushed to the side by the rich, the powerful, and the ruthless. Serafina Hayes was one of them, until the moment she was given the power to fight back. But true power wasn't the $900 million. It was the choice she made to not become the monsters she was fighting, but to seek justice for those who had none. What do you think of Serafina's final choice? Was her justice too harsh or not harsh enough? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. This story is a reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the strongest. If you were moved by her journey from a ghost to a guardian, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more real-life drama every single week. Your support means everything,